When I lay dying of heart failure on the hospital bed, my husband, Chris Anderson, was in Switzerland with my twin sister, Amelia Cross, watching the snow. He never came to see me one last time. Later, as my soul drifted above, I watched him scatter my ashes onto the orchid on our terrace, the orchid he had been tending for Amelia for 10 years. He stroked its fragile leaves with a tenderness I had never heard in his voice. Isabel, your heart saved Amelia. Now even your ashes can stay with her. You should be happy, shouldn't you? Amelia loves this flower. You'll have to nourish it well, do you understand? It was then I realized my long-lost sister, the one who had only just been found after years of being trafficked, was the one engraved on his heart. And I, Isabel Hart, was nothing more than a pitiful stand-in, identical in appearance but never in fate. That night, consumed by rage, I was reborn. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in our marital home. The clock on the wall pointed to 3 in the afternoon, sunlight pouring through the windows. In exactly 1 hour, Chris Anderson's assistant would call with the best news of my life. They had found my twin sister, Amelia Cross. In my previous life, when I picked up that call, I had burst into tears of joy. I even called Chris, who is abroad on business, to share the news. On the other end of the line he had fallen silent for a long moment, then spoke with trembling excitement. Back then, I had thought he was happy for me. Now I knew he was only happy for himself. For his long-lost beloved, found at last. I threw off the covers and walked barefoot onto the terrace. The orchid stood quietly in the corner, its leaves a sickly, suffocating green. In my past life, Chris had cherished it above all else. He watered it every day, polished its leaves, never allowing anyone else to touch it. He told me it was for someone very important. Once I accidentally knocked off a leaf, and he didn't speak a single word to me for 3 whole days. I raised my foot and kicked the porcelain flower pot hard. Crash! The sharp sound of shattering porcelain cut through the still afternoon air. Soil and shards scattered across the terrace, the orchid's roots laid bare in the open air. I picked up my phone and dialed Ben Harris, my lawyer. Uncle Ben, please send me another copy of my mother's equity transfer agreement and the prenuptial contract. The most detailed version. After that, I returned to the bedroom and calmly waited for the call that would change everything. Right on time, the phone rang. I answered, and the assistant's voice came through, feigning excitement. Madam, wonderful news, we found Miss Amelia. I hung up. Unlike in my past life, I did not break down in tears. Half an hour later, the Anderson family car pulled up downstairs. Chris burst inside, his eyes bloodshot, his breathing uneven. He grabbed my shoulders with trembling hands. Isabel, did you hear? Amelia has been found. His grip was so tight it hurt. I looked at his lovesick face, and all I felt was irony. Yes, I heard. My voice was calm. He froze, clearly stunned by my reaction. You're not happy? She's your sister. I lifted my gaze, staring at him steadily. Of course I'm happy. Then why? I was just wondering, I cut him off, if it's finally time to bring out the diary you keep locked in your study. Chris Anderson's face turned deathly pale. That diary was filled with nothing but his longing for Amelia Cross. Their childhood memories, his agony after she went missing, every page echoing her name. When I had once stumbled across it in my past life and cheerfully confronted him, he had only locked it away in a safe and coldly said, "Just remember you are Mrs. Anderson now. That's all that matters. You're talking nonsense." His eyes darted away as he released me. I smiled faintly and said nothing more. That evening, the Cross family held a banquet to welcome Amelia home. My so-called father held the hand of a frail, timid-looking girl, his face glowing with excitement as he introduced her to the guests. That girl was Amelia Cross. Chris Anderson's gaze clung to her like glue, unable to look away for even a moment. He carried a glass of warm water over to her, fussing awkwardly in a way I had never seen from him before. The guests all sighed in admiration. They said our sisterly bond was so deep that even my husband treated my little sister with such care. I walked up to them with a wine glass in hand. Amelia just returned. She's weak. Don't let her stand too long. I handed the glass to Chris. Chris, take good care of my sister for me. Amelia looked at me, overwhelmed, her timid voice barely audible. Thank you, sister. But Chris's eyes grew complicated: guilt, hesitation, and a trace of anger at having his secret exposed. He downed the wine in one gulp. When the banquet ended, he drove me home in silence. Only after we entered the house did he finally speak, his voice hoarse. Isabel, what were you trying to say tonight? Nothing, I replied, slipping off my heels. Only that you seemed happier than I, her real sister, could ever be. His body stiffened. Soon, Amelia Cross moved into the Cross family mansion as expected. But almost every day, she came to my house instead, with the excuse, "Sister, I'm scared being alone." And Chris Anderson personally drove her back and forth each time, rain or shine. Today, he brought her over again. The three of us sat in the living room, the air so tense it could freeze over. Amelia Cross fidgeted with the hem of her dress and whispered, "Sister, Dad said Mom used to love a set of jade jewelry. She's kept it for you. I just wanted to see it." Before I could respond, Chris Anderson interjected, his voice casual, almost commanding. "Isabel, Amelia has suffered so much. What's wrong with letting her take a look? Give it to her." The self-righteousness in his tone made me chuckle. That jewelry had been my mother's last token left for me, the one thing I could cling to. In my previous life, it had played out the same way. Amelia asked for it, Chris backed her up, I refused, and they accused me of jealousy and cruelty. In the end, under Chris's cold shoulder and Amelia's tears, I had reluctantly given in. The jewelry had ended up around Amelia's neck, never to be removed. Not happening. I refused flatly. Chris's brow furrowed immediately. "Isabel Hart. That's my mother's heirloom, not an exhibit." I stood up. "If she wants it, she can ask Mom herself." "You," Chris snapped, standing, his anger barely contained. "How can you speak to Amelia like that? She's endured 20 years of suffering. Isn't it only right to make it up to her?" "Make it up to her?" I turned to him, coldly. "Did I cause her suffering? Chris Anderson, get your roll straight. You're my husband, not her brother." Tears streamed down Amelia's face, her cries trembling through her sobs. "Sister, please don't be angry. I don't want it. It's all my fault." She reached for Chris's sleeve as she cried. Chris immediately turned to her, full of tender concern. "Don't cry, Amelia. It's not your fault." Once Amelia was comforted, he turned to me. His gaze was ice cold. "Isabel Hart, when did you become so unreasonable?" The next day, my old heart condition flared. A stabbing pain clenched my chest. Darkness crept over my vision, and I fainted. When I came to, I was back in a hospital room. The antiseptic sting, the white ceiling, everything mirrored the moment I had died in my past life. A doctor in a white coat entered, gold-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, radiating gentle authority. Jack Thomas. He had been the surgeon in my previous life, the one who could only solemnly declare my death. I remembered him walking out of the operating room, eyes red with grief. "You're awake, Miss Amelia," he said, checking the monitors. "No major danger for now, but you'll need rest." "Thank you, Dr. Haida." "Jack." I smiled lightly. He seemed surprised by my composure. In my previous life, every flare-up had me clinging to him like a lifeline, begging for my life. "Do you want me to call your husband?" he asked. "No need," I lowered my eyes. "Let him be busy." From outside came Chris Anderson's suppressed anger. "Dr. Jack, how is my wife? Can your hospital even handle this?" Jack Thomas frowned and walked out. I didn't listen. I simply pulled out my phone and sent a message to Ben Harris, my lawyer. "Uncle Ben, the plan can begin." Chris soon pushed open the door, feigning worry. "Isabel, are you okay? You scared me to death." He reached for my hand, but I withdrew it under the covers. His hand froze midair, his expression sour. I'm fine. How can you be fine? He raised his voice. The doctor said you can't be upset anymore. Isabel Hart, do you need to end up in the emergency room before you'll stop? His outburst, to anyone else, might seem like concern. Jack Thomas, passing by the door, caught this and shot Chris a measuring glance. When I was discharged, Chris didn't pick me up. His assistant did. She told me Chris was tied up with urgent company matters, and that I should first return to the Cross family mansion. I smirked coldly. Urgent matters, indeed, meaning being with Amelia. Sure enough, as I entered the Cross estate I saw Chris Anderson and Amelia Cross seated with my father in the garden, drinking tea, laughter floating around them. At the sight of me, their laughter froze. Father cleared his throat and waved me over. Isabel, come sit. I took the seat opposite him. Isabel, look. Amelia has suffered so much all these years. The Cross family must make it right. His tone was earnest. I lifted my teacup silently. Your father and Chris Anderson's father discussed it and decided to transfer 10% of your Cross Group shares to Amelia. You see, I remembered this all too well from my previous life. They had used guilt and familial bonds to manipulate me, and I had reluctantly handed over the shares my mother left me, half of them to Amelia. It had been the first and last time I willingly gave up what was mine. I put down the cup and glanced at Chris Anderson lightly. He stared nervously, a faint, barely perceptible hope in his eyes. Sure, I said, smiling. All three froze, clearly unprepared for such easy agreement. Father beamed. I knew Isabel was the most sensible one. However, I continued, my tone shifting, I have a condition. What condition? Speak. I looked at Chris Anderson, enunciating each word. He must transfer all his assets to me, everything, including his shares in the Anderson Group. Isabel Hart, you're insane. Chris Anderson shot to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief. My father's expression darkened as well. Isabel, don't be ridiculous. I just smiled at Chris. What's wrong? You don't want to? What, you so worried about my sister? Didn't you say I should make it up to her? And now that it's with your things, you refuse? Chris Anderson, I said, calmly, your concern for her is so cheap. That day we left in anger and silence. Back home, Chris finally lost control. He hurled a crystal ashtray across the room. It shattered on the floor. Isabel Hart, what are you trying to do? His eyes were red, his voice a growl like a cornered beast. You weren't like this before. When did you become so petty, so cruel? I looked at him, calm as ever. I've always been like this. You were just too blind to notice. You, his chest heaved with rage. All for a few shares, you'd throw family aside? Amelia is your real sister. She's my sister, not yours. I met his eyes with icy calm. Save the righteous speeches, Chris Anderson. Aren't you tired of them? Fine, fine, he laughed bitterly, pointing at my chest. Isabel Hart, you really are something. Not only is your heart wicked, but your very soul is black. Amelia is cleaner, kinder than you 1,000 times over. She has suffered so much, yet she has to bow to your temper. She deserves the best of everything and you deserve nothing. His words were hauntingly familiar, just as they had been in my previous life when he forced me to give up the heart transplant. Back then, I had begged him through tears, pleading for my life. He had coldly told me, Isabel, Amelia needs this heart more than you do. You've enjoyed 20 years of wealth. Be grateful. So in his mind, even living was a luxury I did not deserve. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, clarity surged through me. Chris Anderson, I called his name. Let's get a divorce. He froze, as if he had heard the most absurd thing imaginable. What did you say? I said divorce. I repeated, deliberately. Tomorrow, I'll have Ben Harris deliver the agreement. You'll never. He grabbed my wrist. Isabel Hart, you think you can threaten me with divorce? Never. You will never leave the Anderson family in this lifetime. He wasn't clinging to me. He was clinging to the shares my mother left me, the ones that could shake the entire Anderson group. To celebrate Amelia Cross officially returning to the Cross family, Father held a grand banquet at the city's most luxurious hotel. The elite of the city all attended. I wore a black gown and sat quietly in the corner, an outsider in my own life. Halfway through, Chris Anderson took Amelia by the hand and walked to the center of the stage. Under the spotlight, Amelia wore a pristine white princess dress, her smile shy yet radiant. Chris held the microphone, gazing at her with adoration. "Today, I am delighted that Amelia has returned to us." Applause erupted from the audience. To make up for the suffering she has endured, I had decided to gift Amelia the villa I own in Shallow Bay. The room gasped. That villa was the Anderson family's gift to us for our marriage. The deed bore both my name and Chris Anderson's. And now, he was giving it to my sister. All eyes turned to me, some sympathetic, some gloating, some eager for drama. Chris's gaze landed on me with a patronizing tilt. "Isabel, as her sister, shouldn't you be happy for Amelia?" He was forcing me. Forcing me to perform generosity in front of the city's elite. Amelia looked at me with her innocent, pleading eyes. "Sister." I smiled. Slowly, deliberately, I rose and walked onto the stage, wine glass in hand. Step by step, I approached him, took the microphone from his hand, and smiled faintly at the crowd. "Of course I'm happy. To celebrate my sister coming home, I prepared a gift of my own." I connected my phone to the banquet hall's giant screen. The next second, a clear recording filled the room. Chris Anderson's voice, drunken yet unmistakable, rang out. "Amelia, do you know I waited 20 years for you? Marrying Isabel Hart was only because her face resembled yours. Every day, looking at her reminded me that I lost you. Now that you're back, it's wonderful. Amelia, I only want you." The recording cut off. Dead silence. I watched Amelia's face drain of color. My father shook with rage. And Chris Anderson, he stared at me, eyes sharp enough to devour me alive. The banquet ended in farce. I became the city's biggest joke, the most vicious woman. The Anderson and Cross family stocks both plummeted the next morning. I didn't return to that nauseating home. I moved straight into a downtown apartment, my mother's private property, unknown to Chris Anderson. My phone blew up. Calls from Chris, my father, and countless media harassment. I blocked them all and unplugged the phone. Finally, the world was quiet. I had been holed up in my apartment for 3 days when Ben Harris's call finally reached my backup phone. "Isabel, they're striking back." Ben's voice was heavy. "The Andersons have petitioned the board to temporarily freeze your voting rights, citing your unstable mental state." "I see." I hung up and looked out at the bustling city streets. The storm had only just begun. Chris Anderson couldn't find me, and he was losing his mind. He mobilized every connection he had, practically turning the city upside down, but I had vanished without a trace. The more frantic he became, the more desperate he got, because the Cross Group's annual shareholders meeting was just around the corner. My shares were the key to whether his father could secure another term as chairman. In my previous life, it was at that very meeting that I had personally pushed the Anderson family to the pinnacle of power. This time, I would personally bring them crashing down. A few days later, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Amelia Cross standing there. She wore a simple, modest dress, her face slightly made up, looking both haggard and pitiful. I opened the door. "Sis," her voice broke as tears fell. "I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Please don't blame Chris, he was just momentarily confused." I had grown tired of her scheming little act. "What do you want?" I leaned against the doorframe, expressionless. Her words faltered against my coldness, and her sobs only grew louder. "Please come home with me. Dad is worried about you, Chris, he misses you too." She edged her way inside as she spoke. I didn't stop her. She stepped into the living room and immediately noticed the framed photo of my mother, and me on the table, the only photo my mother had left behind. She picked it up and traced the image with her fingers. "Mom was so beautiful," she whispered. Then her hand slipped. Crash! The frame hit the floor, the glass shattering, scratching across my mother's face. Oh no! I'm so sorry, sis, I didn't mean to. She crouched in panic to pick up the pieces. I walked over, silent as ever. When she looked up, I raised my hand and delivered a sharp, resounding slap across her face. The sound echoed, leaving her stunned. "You hit me?" she stammered, clutching her face in disbelief. "Hit you? I haven't even killed you yet, consider yourself lucky." I crouched to carefully retrieve the torn photo, blowing off the shards of glass. At that moment, the apartment door was kicked open. Chris Anderson stormed in, arriving just in time to see Amelia crying and clutching her face, while I stood there with a mask of ice-cold indifference. "Isabel Hart," he roared, rushing forward to shield Amelia. "What the hell are you doing? Amelia came here with good intentions, and you treat her like this?" His gaze, full of heartbreak and disappointment, fell on the clear 5-finger mark on Amelia's cheek. I looked at the pair of them and smiled. "Leave." "Excuse me?" I said, "take your precious little darling and get out of my house." I pointed toward the door, speaking each word like a weapon. "This is Ben Harris, my divorce lawyer. He will personally deliver your copy of the settlement." Ben had appeared at the doorway unnoticed, flanked by 2 bodyguards. Chris Anderson's face went completely black. The divorce proceedings were messy. As expected, the Andersons used my heart condition as leverage, hiring so-called expert authorities to issue a report claiming I was mentally unstable and unfit to manage corporate assets. They wanted to paint me as a crazed woman scorned by love, stripping me of everything. Outside the courtroom, the press was thronging. Chris played the part of the betrayed yet devoted husband in front of cameras. "No matter what Isabel has done, she is my wife. I will wait for her to calm down." Amelia played the role of the gentle, wronged sister, concerned only for her elder sibling. "I believe my sister just had a moment of weakness. Please don't pressure her further." Together they almost convinced everyone. My reputation was in ruins. On the day of the hearing, the Anderson legal team exuded confidence. When they presented their absurd medical report, my lawyer, Uncle Ben, simply called my witness. Jack Thomas. Dressed in a sharp suit, carrying a briefcase, he walked calmly to the witness stand. "Your Honor," he began, his gaze firm yet warm, "as Isabel Hart's attending physician, I can attest that although Ms. Amelia suffers from a heart condition, her mental state has always been stable. She has been actively cooperating with treatment. She is clear-headed, logical, and fully capable of managing her own affairs." As for the report submitted by the opposing side, he pushed up his glasses, a hint of disdain in his tone. "It is riddled with flaws and unprofessional at best." From his briefcase, he produced a more detailed and authoritative medical report, along with a complete record of my treatments. Chris Anderson's face went green on the spot. He stared daggers at Jack Thomas, as if he wanted to burn a hole straight through him. He couldn't understand why an outsider would go to such lengths to help me. In my past life, Jack Thomas owed me his life. This life, he had come to repay his debt. The shareholders' meeting proceeded as scheduled. I appeared at the conference room entrance, dressed in a crisp white suit. Every eye in the room turned to me. Chris Anderson and his father sat at the head of the table, their faces so dark you could almost see water dripping from them. Amelia Cross was there too, sitting beside Chris, nervously watching me. "Isabel Hart, you actually showed up." Chris Anderson's father slammed the table, seething with rage. I ignored him and walked straight to my seat. The meeting began. The first agenda item was a proposal to remove Chris Anderson's father from the chairman position. The vote started and the tally quickly reached a deadlock. Everyone knew which vote would decide the outcome. It was mine. Chris Anderson's gaze met mine, complicated and raw. There was pleading, there was threat, and a flicker of panic even he didn't fully recognize. "Isabel," he lowered his tone, almost begging, "let's not do this. Let's go home and talk it out, okay? There's nothing left to discuss between us." I raised my hand. Just as I was about to cast my decisive vote, the conference room door swung open. Ben Harris entered with his team. "Apologies for the interruption," Ben said, handing a document to every shareholder present. "This is the last will of Ms. Isabel Hart's mother, Amelia Cross's mother." The faces of Chris and his father drained of color instantly. "The will clearly stipulates," Ben's voice was calm but carried to every corner of the room, "that all shares of the Cross Group inherited by Ms. Isabel Hart come with a special provision. If the Anderson family during the course of their marriage to Ms. Amelia engages in any actions detrimental to her interests, or if the marriage ends due to the husband's fault, Amelia has the right to donate all her shares, free of charge, to the Jack Medical Charity Foundation. And this donation takes effect immediately and is irrevocable." The room fell into stunned silence. Everyone stared at Chris Anderson as if he were a fool. He might just be the first man in history to push away a mountain of gold and silver. I watched him slump in disbelief and finally allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. "Chris Anderson, you thought you married a substitute. No, but you married was the very lifeblood of the Anderson family, and for your first love, you severed it with your own hands." The Andersons were finished. The moment a will was revealed, Cross Group's stock plummeted, teetering on the brink of collapse within days. Banks came calling for debts, partners severed ties. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Chris Anderson came to me. He knelt outside my apartment, soaked from an entire night of rain, begging me to rescind the order. "Isabel, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I love you, always have. My feelings for Amelia were only sibling affection. It's my fault I couldn't tell the difference. Please give me one more chance." I stood by the window, silently watching him. Just as in my previous life, I had watched him kneeling in the rain, pleading for my heart to be given to Amelia Cross. Karma has a way of coming full circle. Amelia Cross came to see me as well. No longer the pitiful sister act, she stormed into my apartment, her face twisted in rage. "Isabel Hart, why are you doing this? You've ruined Chris, and you've ruined me. You can't stand to see us happy, you venomous woman." I watched her hysteria with quiet amusement. "Your happiness has always been built on my bones," I said calmly. "Now, I'm just taking back what is rightfully mine." She was furious, lunging at me. Out of nowhere, Jack Thomas appeared, stepping between us. He grabbed Amelia's wrist, ice cold as ice. "Miss Amelia, please leave." Amelia shot him a look, then at me, her eyes full of jealousy and resentment. She probably thought I had taken everything from her. But she didn't realize none of it had ever belonged to her. I invoked the will. All shares of the Cross Group were transferred to the Jack Medical Charity Foundation. The Anderson family officially declared bankruptcy. Their mansion was seized, their luxury cars auctioned. Chris Anderson's father couldn't bear the blow and suffered a stroke. Chris Anderson, once the invincible golden boy, became penniless overnight. I heard that Amelia Cross, the day after the Andersons' collapse, snatched the last of Chris's remaining cash and vanished. She was probably off looking for another man to secure her luxurious lifestyle. But with her reputation as a traitor and homewrecker, who in high society would take her in now? It no longer concerned me. I donated the jade jewelry my mother left me to the museum. I converted the villa in Repulse Bay into a shelter for stray animals. I began working alongside Jack Thomas to run the charity foundation. We supported many people like me, those who had been looked down upon by illness, but still longed to live. Watching them regain a second chance at life made me feel truly alive. With Jack Thomas's help, I reached out to a top international cardiac research center. They were conducting a brand new experimental treatment, high risk, but potentially complete cure for the disease that had tormented me for 2 lifetimes. I decided to take the chance. The day before I left for abroad, Jack Thomas came to see me off. We sat for a long time in the airport CAF. "Isabel," he said, his eyes carrying an emotion I couldn't quite read, "make sure you come back." I nodded. "I'll be back. I want to see you take the foundation to new heights." He smiled a warm, comforting smile. "I'll be waiting." As the plane took off, I watched the city shrink beneath me, a sense of calm settling over my heart. All the pain of my previous life felt like a nightmare I could never wake from. But now the nightmare was over. I spent 3 years abroad. The treatment was grueling. There were times I thought I wouldn't make it, that I couldn't endure any longer. But every time I thought of Jack's words, "I'll be waiting," and found the strength to keep going. 3 years later, fully recovered, I returned to the city. At the airport, Jack Thomas was there to meet me. He looked a little thinner, a little more mature. When he saw me, he walked over and wrapped me in a gentle embrace. "Welcome home." After returning, I occasionally heard news about Chris Anderson. After his bankruptcy, he tried various jobs delivering food, driving for ride-hailing apps, carrying bricks on construction sites, but nothing lasted. Accustomed to luxury, he couldn't endure the hardships of an ordinary life. Eventually, desperate for quick money, he turned to shady schemes and illegal fundraising. He was swindled out of everything and ended up deep in debt. The next time I saw him was on a rainy evening. I had just left the foundation when I noticed a man huddled under a rooftop, trying to avoid the rain. His hair greasy, his beard unkempt, wearing a filthy, worn-out coat, reeking of sour sweat. If not for that familiar face, I might not have recognized him, the once confident, dashing Chris Anderson. He froze when he saw me. Struggling to his feet, he walked toward me step by step, eyes full of regret and unwillingness. "Isabel," his voice was hoarse. I stopped and silently watched him. "Are you doing okay?" he asked cautiously. "Very well." The light in his eyes extinguished completely. He lowered his head, like a child who had done something wrong, a quiver in his voice. "Isabel, did you ever love me? Even just a little?" I looked at him, memories of my past life flooding back. I remembered the orchid nourished with my ashes. I smiled, calm and serene. "The Isabel Hart who loved you," I said, meeting his eyes and speaking each word clearly, "died a long time ago. Her ashes are probably somewhere in the world, nurturing something beautiful." His body shuddered violently, as if all his strength had been drained. I didn't look back. I opened my umbrella and walked into the rain. I was with Jack Thomas now. No grand proposal. No lavish wedding. One sunny afternoon, he held my hand, and we went to the civil affairs office to register our marriage. Our days were simple, ordinary, yet filled with happiness. He continued to save lives as a doctor. I continued to run my foundation, helping those in need. Later, I read a news report about Chris Anderson's fate. Convicted of fraud and illegal fundraising, he was sentenced to 15 years. The photo showed him in handcuffs, graying at the temples, eyes hollow, a living shell of the man he once was. As for Amelia Cross, I never heard from her again. She was like a speck of dust blown by the wind, vanished without a trace. One weekend, Jack took me to an orchid cultivation center in the countryside. In the greenhouse, orchids of every color bloomed, breathtaking in their beauty. He led me to a pot of blooming white phalaenopesips. "For you," he said. I looked at the flawless white petals, shining in the sunlight, radiating life. I smiled. It turns out not all orchids need ashes to grow. Some flowers thrive with just sunlight, fresh air, and love. And so do I.